Hi and welcome to DDG.
Declan Dad Gaming.
I'm your dad Chris.
I'm Declan.
And we're here to talk about a few things. Mostly an introduction to what we're doing at the moment. What are we doing, Declan?
Well, our channel is going to be all about reviewing games and benchmarking them, and also reviewing hardware. In this case, mostly GPUs and PC parts of various different kinds.
We've got limited access to things. We're just doing this as a bit of a hobby that hopefully helps out a couple of people out there. We're working with the games that we've got. We're working with the hardware that we've got. Fortunately, it's a bit of a gaming family, so we've got 3 PCs here. That's mine behind us that we're going to use to test all the GPUs on, and we'll probably use my Steam library because it's the largest. I've been on Steam for 13 years, so I've got tons of games in there. What are we doing today?
Well, today we're going to be benchmarking a few games on the graphics card, the GTX 1080 Ti. Yep.
So we're going to use the GTX 1080 Ti. We've also got to grab some other data as well. We want to do some comparisons. So in the house at the moment we've got a GTX 1066 gig, and we've also got a GTX 1050 Ti 4 gig. And it'd be cool to also throw in some things. We've got a Ryzen 3 2200G. It'd be nice to take out the graphics card from that rig and run some APU tests to see what the onboard graphics has for that thing compared to what we're doing with the dedicated graphics cards. But today, specifically, we're doing the GTX 1080 Ti because we need to start somewhere. And we've just got to figure out what kind of games we're going to run the benchmarks on.
Hopefully good ones.
Fingers crossed. We'll do our best.
We sure will. Not
specifications for the rig that we're going to be using to benchmark all the GPUs is the one that the GTX 1080 Ti is sitting in at the moment. As mentioned, this is my personal rig behind us. That's what we're going to be using. So that's got a Ryzen 7 2700X. It also is sitting on the Asus Crosshair 7 Hero motherboard, and I've got 16 gig of RAM in there, running at 2666 megahertz, running at a low frequency at the moment because unfortunately I'm unlucky enough not to have a very good FlareX set, and it just doesn't want to seem to go any higher than that. I'm not much of a tweaker, but that's what I'm left with. So, too bad for me, I guess. Ding.
Oh yeah, ding.
Alright, moving on to the benchmarks. We're starting with Far Cry 5. I've got everything running in ultra presets in 3 different resolutions. What have we got?
720p, 1080p and 1440p.
So, just an introduction to the graphs that we've got in front of you here. The red, that indicates the minimum frames per second. The green indicates the maximum frames per second. The yellow indicates the average frames per second. Okay, so moving on to the benchmarks. First up, we've got Far Cry 5. As you can see here, we're obviously CPU bottlenecked. I've also got some information up here. So I bought this brand new, the Asus Strix GTX 1080 Ti for $1,319 Australian. I have noticed you can pick them up for second hand for $800. So I've included the price per frame information that we've got on here. But yeah, as mentioned, CPU bottlenecked here, so we're getting same frames regardless of which resolution we're running. Moving on to Deus Ex Mankind Divided with MSAA times 8. It's a benchmark I quite like running because well, it stresses the computer out and we can see real differences between the resolutions here, not being CPU bottlenecked for a change. Moving on to Deus Ex Mankind Divided without MSAA times 8. And as you can see, well, 1080p and 1440p offer pretty much the same performance, with the only difference really being the max frames per second, but average frames per second probably within the margin of error or thereabouts. Quite seems to like 1440p. Moving on to The Witcher 3, what can you tell us about that, Declan?
Yep. As
you can see in The Witcher 3, it's pretty much a staircase graph here. You can see 720p, you get 131.3, 1080p 109.6, 1440p 88.3 average frames per second. So very, very smooth performance throughout, but results as expected. On to Final Fantasy 15, and pretty much the same results here. It looks like there's barely any difference between 1080p and 1440p here. They seem to behave pretty much the same, with extra frames being at 720p, but why would you run that if you've got a GTX 1080 Ti? On to Doom. As you can see with Doom, we are definitely CPU bottlenecked here. So there's not really much to comment on here. Run it at any resolution you like. Everyone knows that Doom plays pretty easily on just about any hardware. Onto Wolfenstein 2, the new Colossus. Pretty much the same results as Doom as far as you can see. You're going to get good frames per second no matter what resolution you're running. However, we're not CPU bottlenecked here, or probably, I suspect, getting close to it with 1080p, and probably tipping out on 720p at 242.5 frames per second. Divinity Original Sin 2. Pretty much another staircase result here. Either way, you're going to get a very smooth performance. It's not a terribly demanding game, so this will run quite smoothly, no worries. GTA 5's not a particularly interesting one. As you can see from the results here, we are definitely CPU bottlenecked as we were in Far Cry 5. Either way, delivering a very smooth performance. Fallout 76, between 720p and 1080p, it looks like there was a CPU bottleneck in place, limiting us at just over 110 frames per second for both resolutions. However, it takes a significant dive when running at 1440p. Although it does deliver a smooth result, you are pretty much limited to 60 frames per second here. Was sort of hoping to get perhaps a little bit better result than that, considering 1080p is right at 114.5. But still smooth nonetheless, and significantly improved over when they first released Fallout 76. Onto Battletech, another game that appears to be heavily CPU bottlenecked. That's just the unfortunate truth of having a Ryzen 7 2700X. However, it still delivers extremely smooth performance and is pretty entertaining to watch as well.
Thank you. So there you have it. There are the results for the GTX 1080 Ti. As expected, they were quite nice. Smooth experience all around. Now, stay tuned for the next fun time video that we do on something